The president of the company invited me to lunch, only to tell me they were pivoting the department's direction. After nearly a decade of building the digital backbone of Carter Steelworks, I was being replaced by the founder's son-in-law. "These things happen," I said with a practiced smile. But they didn't know. I'd seen it coming for months. "My name's Mark Ellison. I'm 48, and for the last 10 years, I've been the invisible engine behind Carter's entire tech operation down in Louisville, Kentucky. I rebuilt their cybersecurity after a breach nearly took them down in 2014. I turned a 4-person IT crew into a 25-person around-the-clock team that kept 2 plants running non-stop. The production lines don't sleep, and neither did I. It was supposed to be a short-term gig after my father passed something to ground me. But I was good at it. And somewhere along the line, this infrastructure, these systems, felt like mine. Not on paper, but where it counts. The lunch was at Silver Oak Grill, the kind of place executives book, to seal major deals, not to discard loyal employees. But that's who Cameron Monroe, our company president, was, always big on optics. "Mark, your contributions have been tremendous," he said as he cut into his salmon. "But we need fresh ideas to meet today's challenges." Translation: they wanted someone younger and cheaper, someone who wouldn't question reckless decisions from the board. Turns out Trevor, the founder's son-in-law, had just wrapped up an MBA from Stanford. He's a rising star in tech-driven operations. Cameron beamed. I just nodded, took a sip of iced tea. "Who's managing the transition?" I asked. Cameron looked relieved I didn't cause a scene. "You'll have 6 weeks. Well, go public with the announcement after the company-wide meeting next month." I signed the NDA. He slid across the table before dessert came, smiled, shook his hand, and told him, "I understood. Business is business." But back at my desk, I saw my access had already been clipped, my system privileges downgraded, my name removed from the department head roster. They'd made their decision long before lunch. That night, I didn't lose sleep over the job. Or the title. It was something else. Something I saw 3 months earlier in the log's irregular access attempts, coming from an internal IP. Executive floor. Someone had been digging through systems they weren't trained to understand, scouring my frameworks, my contingencies, my personal archives. I realized then they weren't just replacing me. They were copying me first. The entire production line at Carter Steelworks had been running on outdated systems, just one server hiccup away from a total shutdown. When I first arrived, I pitched CEO Preston Carter a 5-year modernization plan. To my surprise, he gave me the green light and the budget. For the next 3 years, I barely saw sunlight. I overhauled every network from scratch, trained a capable IT crew, and built layers of redundancies to ensure we'd never go dark. When a massive ice storm knocked out the power grid across half of Kentucky, we stayed online. Our machines didn't miss a beat. That got the board's attention. My budget tripled. I built a real team from scratch: Vanessa, a project manager with unmatched attention to detail, and Luis, a coder who could outthink any software bug. We weren't just IT anymore. We were Carter Steelworks insurance policy. Harrison Carter, the majority owner and Preston's father, shook my hand at the 2020 company holiday party and said, "You made us competitive again. We couldn't have scaled nationwide without what you built." For a while, I thought I'd found my place. The first red flag came last fall. Some outside consultant showed up unannounced, asking surface-level questions about systems I personally engineered. When I asked who authorized the audit, he mumbled executive leadership and quickly pivoted topics. A week later, I lost access to the board's shared files. The explanation: routine server cleanup. By December, Preston began canceling our one-on-one meetings, always polite excuses. Then, during our New Year's strategy retreat in Lexington, I overheard Harrison bragging about his nephew, a recent graduate from Caltech. "Whiz kid," he said. Got a dozen job offers already. I didn't think twice at the time. I should have. The final straw was when Vanessa pulled me aside. I was in a planning meeting you weren't invited to, she said concerned, when I asked why Preston changed the subject. Something feels off, Mark. Like they're planning around you. 2 nights later, I was alone in the server room past 7:00 p.m. as usual. The hum of the racks, the gentle flicker of the LED light sit, was the one place that still felt like mine. 11 years of work behind those walls. I was running a quick maintenance check when someone cleared their throat behind me. It was Nathan Carter Harrison's golden boy nephew. Mid-20s, clean-cut designer watch, Silicon Valley charm. Just getting a feel for the layout, he said casually. Preston said you'd be showing me the ropes soon. Did he now? He scanned the servers. Impressive. A little traditional but tight. I've been reading your documentation, very thorough. Got a few ideas for how we can bring this place into the future. I smiled politely, chalk on my tongue. When he left, I sat at my desk and pulled up the system logs. Nathan's admin credentials had been created 3 weeks earlier, before Preston's lunch invite. He already had top-level access and had reviewed every protocol I'd written. I texted Luis Joe's coffee. 6:30 a.m. Need to talk. That night I drove down to the Ohio River, parked at the spot where Claire and I used to watch steamboats pass by when we first moved to Louisville. I thought about what Preston said when he made me director. You're the backbone of Carter Steelworks. Turns out backbones can be replaced too. The next morning, Luis was already sipping coffee when I walked in. He looked tired. They're forcing you out, aren't they? He said. I nodded. Then it's time we remind them who really runs this place. I figured something was off, Luis said, stirring his coffee slowly. They've been asking weird questions, having me explain your system stuff they never cared about before. When I asked, a couple of weeks now. He looked down ashamed. I should have told you. I didn't hold it against him. Luis had a wife, 2 kids, and a mortgage. He couldn't afford to rock the boat. What's your plan? He asked. Until that moment, I didn't think I had one. But sitting there in a quiet diner just outside Louisville, watching early commuters scurry across the frozen sidewalk, something clicked into place. A sense of clarity I hadn't felt since Ellie left. They think it's all in the documentation, I said, but you and I both know it's not. Luis leaned in. The tools. The custom scripts. I nodded. The interface patches. The real-time monitoring tools. The client data sync known of it's in the official records. I built them on my own time. They don't even know how it really works. I'm not going to sabotage anything I said, but I'm not handing over what's mine either. Luis watched me for a beat, then nodded once. He understood. I need backups of everything I personally created, I said quietly. And I need to know who's still loyal. The official announcement came the following week during the quarterly all-hands meeting. Preston stood on stage, beaming under the fluorescent lights. Nathan Carter, fresh-faced, 28 years old, wearing a blazer he probably didn't even pick out himself, stood beside him, smiling like a campaign poster. We're excited about this new chapter, Preston declared. Mark has been instrumental in building the IT foundation we rely on today. We're grateful for his contributions as we transition leadership to Nathan over the next 6 weeks. There was a brief, confused hush in the room. My team looked blindsided. Vanessa caught my eye across the conference hall. Her brow, furrowed lips pressed tight. I gave the faintest nod. After the meeting, I asked for a sit-down with Preston and HR. Some of the systems Nathan is inheriting, I said, were built on my own time using my proprietary framework. I'd like to discuss compensation or renegotiation. Diane from HR slid a paper across the table. Company policy is clear, Mr. Weller. Anything developed during your employment belongs to Carter Steelworks. Not everything, I replied, tapping the contract. The initial System Sync platform predates my hiring. I licensed it to the company. It's right there in the agreement. Preston shifted in his seat. That was over a decade ago, Mark, and every update since then was an extension of that core Cotomy code. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm asking to be treated fairly. Well, review it, Diane said. Preston nodded stiffly. In the meantime, let's focus on ensuring a smooth handover to Nathan. I knew the tone. They were buying time. The next morning, I tried logging into the development server's access denied. Routine protocol during transitions, the automated message read, Nathan called a team meeting. I wasn't invited. I showed up anyway. Mark, he said, glancing up from the whiteboard with that smug, polished look. Glad you could join us. I was just walking the team through some changes we'll be making to the network. I leaned against the doorframe. Which part of the network? The main floor architecture, he said with full confidence. We're streamlining the protocols. I raised an eyebrow. Those protocols keep the automated lines from overheating under peak loads. They were custom-coded to match the quirks of our older robotics. Nathan smirked. Modern systems don't require those kinds of legacy workarounds. Vanessa spoke up. They're not workarounds. They're adaptations. Mark wrote them after the 2018 meltdown. They saved production. The room fell quiet. Nathan's smirk slipped for a fraction of a second. Well, he said curtly, I appreciate the historical context, but we're moving forward with simplification. Then he turned back to the whiteboard like I wasn't even there. Later that afternoon, I got an email from corporate legal. Carter Steelworks was asserting full ownership of all internal platforms, including CoreLink, my flagship system based on some buried clause about integrated technologies becoming company assets. They offered me a one-time technology acquisition incentive of $5,000. I stared at the screen. After more than a decade of work, they were offering me $5,000 to walk away from what I built. But the real gut punch came the next morning. I found out Nathan had scheduled one-on-one evaluations with everyone on the tech team. Not transition briefings assessments. He was deciding who stayed, who didn't. Luis texted me afterward. He asked if your systems were necessary or just overly complex, like he was fishing for reasons to tear things down. That evening, I opened my personal email and saw a message from one of our longtime suppliers. They were confused about a new licensing agreement Carter had sent them, one he'd never seen. I reviewed the attached PDF. It was a contract signed by Preston that transferred all of my custom vendor interfaces to a third-party platform. The name of that vendor, Nextbit Systems, a brand-new startup founded by one of Nathan's former classmates from Stanford. They weren't just replacing me. They were gutting the work I'd built from scratch and funneling it into the hands of insiders. Selling it off. I tried to access the server where I kept archived versions of my source code. Access denied. They'd shut me out. Game on. They thought I'd quietly walk out the back door while they cashed in on my legacy. They didn't understand who they were dealing with. I reached out to an old friend, Darren Connolly, a cybersecurity specialist I'd worked with, back when I first moved to Chicago. We met at a truck stop diner out on Route 41, the kind of place people like Preston wouldn't be caught dead in. Legally, Darren said, after I laid it out, you're in a gray zone. They're going to argue it's all company IP, but something about this timing smells bad. Exactly, I said. Why now, Ildig, Darren offered. Just a recon job. Nothing invasive. Let's see what surfaces. 2 nights later, he called me just before midnight. You're gonna want to sit down, he said. He'd found SEC documentation. Carter Steelworks was in final stage negotiations to be acquired by Techline Industries, a major industrial conglomerate based out of Philadelphia. The deal was contingent on 2 things: modernized technical infrastructure and demonstrated leadership succession. They're cleaning house, Darren said. Polishing the books. Your system's core link, your interface layer, they're a big part of the valuation. Techline wants tech-forward operations. Your name's all over the documentation. But that wasn't the worst of it. Darren had dug deeper and found that Leonard Carter, the company's founder, had liquidated most of his shares last quarter. Preston and the other execs were set to make millions. Golden parachutes executive titles at Techline. Meanwhile, the rest of us were disposable. But what broke me wasn't the sale. It was the internal emails Darren uncovered. Messages between Preston and Leonard dated 6 months earlier. Talking about bringing Nathan on board, grooming him to lead the next generation of Carter Steelworks. While I was sleeping on a cot in the server room fixing a ransomware breach at 3 a.m., they were interviewing my replacement over Zoom. That night I drove out to the old warehouse district in South Chicago, where I'd first mapped out the CoreLink system on the back of a blueprint roll in a dusty tech startup incubator. I parked and sat in silence until the sky began to lighten with morning. Back home, I pulled out an old drive from my closet and plugged it in. There it was, the original CoreLink source code-dated and time-stamped full 8 months before I joined Carter Steelworks. Alongside it, early documentation, including an email from Preston asking if I could tweak CoreLink to fit Carter's systems. His exact words, "Well, formalize the ownership stuff once things settle." I had trusted him. That was on me. The next morning, Nathan called me into a transition meeting with Preston and Diane from HR. "We're moving the timeline up," Preston said flatly. "Your last day will be next Friday. 2 weeks instead of 6, I said. "Any particular reason Nathan's proven to be highly capable?" Diane chimed in with corporate polish. "And frankly, Ryan, your attitude hasn't been conducive to a smooth transition." I nodded slowly. "Got it. Well, need all documentation and training finalized by Wednesday," Nathan added, already flipping through his tablet like I was a footnote. "Of course," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "And regarding ownership of CoreLink, have you reviewed the original licensing agreements?" Preston's jaw clenched. "Our legal team has determined that all systems integrated into Carter Steelworks operations fall under company ownership. The exit package is generous, Ryan. I recommend you take it." I stood up calmly. "I'll have my attorney review everything." Preston's eyes narrowed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. It won't change anything." As I walked out, I sent a text to Luis Plan B. Tonight? 7 hours later, Luis met me in the dim corner of a Whole Foods parking lot in Cambridge. He handed over a small flash drive in a plain envelope. "Everything you asked for," he said. "Original repositories, server logs, encrypted keys." "Thanks," I said. "Why are you doing this?" Luis met my eyes. "Because they think we're all disposable." That weekend, I didn't rest. I compiled years of work, my original CoreLink framework, the email thread with Preston, discussing licensing, before my hire, the changelogs proving the system's evolution. It was mine, and I wasn't letting them sell it without a fight. Monday morning, I arrived before anyone else. Vanessa was already at her desk, hunched over her keyboard, dark circles under her eyes. "You heard?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "Accelerated timeline. Nathan's scrambling. He held emergency sessions all weekend trying to replicate your load balancing protocols. It didn't go well. Damage line 2 was down for 4 hours, missed 2 shipments, roughly 50 grand in delays." I kept my expression neutral. "Unfortunate." She looked around. "Ryan, I think him next. He's been asking if my position is still relevant." I'd suspected as much. Vanessa knew too much, too many quiet miracles to be ignored. "Do you trust me?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Completely." I slid a sealed envelope across her desk. "If anything strange happens this week, open that. It explains everything." That afternoon, I met with 3 separate patent attorneys in downtown Boston. Paid extra for urgent filing of provisional patents covering the unique integration modules of CoreLink. Not the entire system, just the essential gears that made it compatible with manufacturing networks. Tuesday, I gave Nathan every transition doc he wanted. I sat in on his planning meetings, nodded, smiled, played the part. Meanwhile, Darren was helping me spin up a remote private server out of state. By midnight, the full pre-Carter version of CoreLink lived safely in a secured environment air-gapped and fully documented. Wednesday morning, I found an email in my personal inbox. Subject line, "Let's Talk, Tech Line." Industry's Boston office, they'd heard I was leaving, and they wanted to meet. I forwarded it to my attorney and dialed TechLine's VP of Operations. He didn't even ask for a sum. "Well, talk after I leave, Carter." "Officially," I said. "Absolutely," he replied. That night I made my final move. Using the credentials Luis had salvaged before his access was wiped, I quietly updated 3 core components of CoreLink. Nothing destructive, nothing unethical, just legal protections. A digital signature checker to detect unauthorized tampering. A license key set to expire exactly 1 day after I walked out the door. And a system alert designed to prompt Carter's leadership to contact me if they wanted continued access. If they signed a legitimate licensing agreement, CoreLink would keep humming. If not, it would slow to a crawl. No sabotage, just protecting what was mine. It was mine. By Thursday morning, Nathan pulled me into his office. "Some of the team say you've been acting oddly," he said, trying to sound casual. "Anything I should know, just focused on wrapping things up," I replied, calm and unreadable. He nodded slowly, studying me. "Well, be resetting all system passwords and credentials tomorrow after your exit. Standard procedure." "Makes sense," I said. "Won't affect CoreLink's core functions, though." "What do you mean? Just that the platform runs, regardless of credential changes. It's resilient by design." I could see the uncertainty flicker in his eyes, wondering if I was bluffing or warning. He chose to brush it off. "All right then, legal will meet with you tomorrow." As I stepped out, Preston passed me in the hall. No eye contact, no handshake, just a quick glance as if 11 years of my life had been reduced to a silent nod. That night, just before midnight, I sent one last encrypted message from my home office. "Verification Alpha 7 confirmed. Countdown engaged." Friday, I turned in my badge, signed the exit paperwork, and declined Nathan's awkwardly planned farewell lunch. I saw the relief in Preston's posture when I walked away without a scene. Luis called as I reached my car. He just reset the admin credentials. "They're reviewing the systems this afternoon." "Thanks," I replied. Now we wait. I spent the weekend unplugged, ignored every unknown number that rang, slept more soundly than I had in years. At 9:17 a.m., Monday, just as Carter Steelworks operations kicked into peak production, every workstation at their 3 facilities lit up with the same alert: "License expired. Please contact developer to renew." By 9:20, the first assembly line shut down. By 9:45, all 3 plants were offline. At 10:30, Preston called my cell personally. "What the hell did you do?" he barked, trying to sound in control, but the panic leaked through. "I didn't do anything," I replied smoothly. "The software license expired." "That's sabotage. That's license enforcement. Check Clause 7 of our original agreement. Carter Steelworks licensed CoreLink. They never owned it." He went silent. "I've already sent your legal team the renewal terms," I added. "They're simple. Formal recognition of my ownership, compensation, and an NDA covering my departure." "You're blackmailing us." "No," I said. "I'm negotiating. That's business." By 3:00 p.m., their attorneys had reviewed everything. By 5:00 they had signed. 3 days later, I sat across from the VP of Operations at Techline Industries in their Boston office. He slid a consulting contract toward me. "We're still acquiring Carter Steelworks," he said, "but we want you running the tech integration as a consultant, not staff." The offer double my former salary, full autonomy, no clock punching. "What about Nathan?" I asked. He hesitated, then smirked slightly. Mr. Blake will be exploring other opportunities. I signed on the spot. 2 weeks later, Luis called. Nathan's gone. Quiet exit. Official line is he's pursuing personal growth. Truth is, 3 of our biggest clients were ready to walk. Preston stayed on through the merger, but his role was symbolic. No team, no authority, just a title and a corner office far from the real action. I didn't feel triumphant, just grounded. What he'd done wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. He'd built something valuable, and I'd made sure it remained mine. A month later, I used my first consulting check to buy a small cabin outside Burlington, on a wooded ridge above Lake Champlain. Nothing extravagant, just quiet. Clean air, a porch that caught the morning light. Vanessa joined my firm 3 months in. Then Luis. Eventually, half my old team was with me, not beneath me. Partners. 1 year later, I ran into Preston at a steakhouse downtown. He saw me, hesitated, then approached my table. "You won," he said quietly. I looked up at him, his suit a little wrinkled, hair thinner, eyes duller. "It wasn't about winning," I replied honestly. "It was about worth, knowing mine." He nodded once, then walked away. I sat there for a while, watching the city shimmer across the water, thinking about all the systems we build, technical, emotional, human. Some fail, some get corrupted, but the ones built on truth, the ones built right, those are the ones that outlast us all.